The snow fell heavy on the Montana plains that December morning in 1878, and Samuel Kane found something that would change his life forever. A half-frozen woman collapsed beside a broken-down wagon, her fingers clutching a crumpled piece of paper. He had been riding the trail between Bannack and Virginia City when he spotted the overturned wagon through the white curtain of snow. His horse, a reliable bay gelding named Rusty, snorted nervously as they approached. Samuel dismounted quickly, his boots crunching in the fresh powder, and that was when he saw her. She was young, maybe 21 or 22, with dark hair matted against her pale face. Her lips had taken on a bluish tint, and her thin cotton dress was completely inadequate for the brutal Montana winter. Miss, can you hear me?" Samuel dropped to his knees beside her, his gloved hands checking for a pulse at her throat. It was there, faint but steady. Relief flooded through him. He noticed the paper clutched in her frozen fingers and gently pried it free. The writing was shaky, desperate. "Please don't send me back." Samuel looked around at the desolate landscape. There was no one else in sight, no other travelers, no sign of where she had come from or where she was going. The wagon was empty except for a few scattered belongings, a torn blanket, and what looked like the remains of meager provisions. Whatever her story was, she had been running from something, and she had nearly died doing it. He did not hesitate. Samuel wrapped his heavy coat around her thin frame and lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, and that worried him more than anything. He secured her on Rusty's back as best he could, then mounted behind her, keeping one arm wrapped firmly around her waist to keep her upright. The ride back to his ranch would take 3 hours in good weather. In this snowstorm, it might take 5. "Hold on," he whispered to the unconscious woman. "Just hold on." The journey was brutal. The wind howled across the open plains, driving snow into his face until he could barely see. Samuel kept Rusty moving at a steady pace, not wanting to push the horse too hard in these conditions, but knowing that every minute counted. The woman in his arms remained unconscious, her body limp against his chest. He could feel her shallow breathing against his neck, and he took that as a good sign. By the time the ranch came into view, Samuel's hands were numb despite his gloves, and his face felt like leather stretched tight over bone. The small cabin looked like salvation, smoke curling from the chimney promising warmth inside. His ranch hand, old Pete, must have kept the fire going. "Pete!" Samuel shouted as he dismounted, carefully lowering the woman into his arms again. "Pete, I need help." The cabin door flew open and Pete emerged, his weathered face showing alarm. "Good Lord, boss, what happened?" "Found her on the trail, near frozen. Help me get her inside." Together they carried her into the warmth of the cabin. Samuel's home was modest but comfortable, a single large room with a stone fireplace, a sturdy bed in one corner, a small kitchen area, and a table with 2 chairs. Pete lived in the bunkhouse about 50 yards away, closer to the barn where they kept the horses and a small herd of cattle. "Get more wood on that fire," Samuel ordered, laying the woman gently on his bed. "And heat water, lots of it." He began removing her wet clothes with clinical efficiency, trying not to think about propriety. This was about saving her life. Her dress was threadbare, patched in several places, and offered no protection against the cold. Underneath, she wore a thin chemise that was equally wet. Samuel grabbed his spare blankets and wrapped her in them, then began rubbing her hands and feet, trying to restore circulation. Pete returned with hot water, and Samuel used it to make warm compresses for her extremities. "What do you think happened to her?" Pete asked, his voice low. "I do not know. Found this on her." Samuel pulled the crumpled note from his pocket and showed it to Pete. The older man's eyes widened. "Someone's property, you reckon?" Samuel's jaw tightened. He knew what Pete was suggesting. There were still places, even in 1878, where women were treated as little more than property, whether through marriage or more sinister arrangements. She is a human being, Pete. Whatever she is running from, she will not be going back unless she chooses to. Pete nodded approvingly. You are a good man, boss. Your pa would be proud. Over the next few hours, Samuel kept vigil beside the bed. He changed the warm compresses regularly, made sure she stayed covered, and waited for her to wake. The storm continued to rage outside, the wind howling like a living thing. It was going to be a long night. Around midnight she stirred. Her eyelids fluttered and a soft moan escaped her lips. Samuel leaned forward, his hand instinctively reaching for hers under the blankets. Easy, he said gently. You are safe. You are in my cabin about 15 miles south of Bannack. My name is Samuel Kane. Her eyes opened fully, and he found himself looking into the most striking green eyes he had ever seen. They were wide with fear at first, then confusion, then a desperate kind of hope. The letter, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Did you read my letter? I did. Are you going to send me back? Samuel looked at this fragile woman who had nearly died alone in the snow and felt something shift in his chest. No, I am not going to send you back. You are safe here. Tears began streaming down her face and she closed her eyes, her body shaking with silent sobs. Samuel sat there, still holding her hand, and let her cry. Whatever she had been through, she needed this release. When the tears finally subsided, she opened her eyes again and looked at him. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for not leaving me there. What is your name? She hesitated, and he could see the internal debate playing across her face. Finally, she said, Catherine. Catherine Turner. Catherine, Samuel repeated, liking the way it sounded. Can you tell me what happened? How did you end up out there in the snow? Catherine's expression became guarded. I was running. The wagon broke down and I tried to walk, but the storm got worse. I thought I was going to die out there. Running from what? She looked away, her jaw set. I cannot tell you that. Please do not ask me. Samuel wanted to press, but he could see the fear in her eyes. All right. You do not have to tell me anything you do not want to, but you should know that you are safe here. No one is going to hurt you. You do not know that. You do not know what they are capable of. Catherine pressed her lips together, clearly regretting saying even that much. I am tired. May I sleep, of course. Rest. We can talk more in the morning. Samuel stood to leave, but her hand shot out from under the blankets and grabbed his wrist. Please do not leave me alone. I am afraid. Her vulnerability touched something deep inside him. Samuel pulled the chair closer to the bed and sat down. I will be right here. Sleep. I will keep watch. Catherine's eyes remained on his face for a long moment, as if she was trying to memorize his features or determine if she could trust him. Finally, exhaustion won out and her eyes closed. Within minutes, her breathing deepened into sleep. Samuel kept his promise. He sat in that chair all night, watching her sleep and wondering about the mystery of Catherine Turner. What was she running from? Who had hurt her so badly that she would rather die in the snow than go back? And why did he feel so protective of a woman he had just met? The storm continued through the night and into the next day. When Catherine woke the second time, it was late morning and Samuel was making breakfast. The smell of frying bacon and fresh coffee filled the cabin. Good morning, he said when he noticed her eyes were open. How are you feeling? Sore, tired, but better. She pushed herself up to a sitting position, keeping the blankets wrapped around her. Where are my clothes? Drying by the fire. They were soaked through. I have some things that might fit you, left over from when my sister used to visit. She is married now, lives in California. I will bring them to you. Samuel retrieved a bundle of clothes from a trunk and handed them to Catherine, then turned his back to give her privacy while she dressed. He heard rustling behind him, then her voice. "All right, you can turn around." She was wearing one of his sister's old dresses, a simple blue calico that was slightly too large but serviceable. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, still damp from the snow. Even in borrowed clothes, even pale and exhausted, she was beautiful. "Hungry?" Samuel asked. Catherine nodded, and he fixed her a plate of bacon, eggs, and biscuits. She ate ravenously, barely pausing between bites. He sat across from her at the table, nursing his coffee and watching her. "When did you last eat?" he asked. 3 days ago, maybe 4. I lost track." "Catherine, I do not mean to push, but you were dying out there. If someone is after you, I need to know. I need to be prepared." She set down her fork and looked at him. In the daylight, he could see the bruises on her neck, fading but still visible. Old bruises. His hands clenched into fists. "Who hurt you?" Catherine's hand went unconsciously to her throat. "My husband." The word hit Samuel like a punch to the gut. Husband. She was married. Of course she was married. A woman like her would not be alone unless something was very wrong. "Where is he now?" "Virginia City, I hope." "That is where I left from. He owns a saloon there, the Silver Dollar. His name is Marcus Turner." She said the name like it tasted bitter. "He bought me from my father 3 years ago when I was 18, paid him $500 and a wagon. My father said I should be grateful, that Marcus was giving me a good life." Samuel's jaw tightened. He had heard stories like this before, fathers selling their daughters to older men under the guise of marriage. It was legal, even if it was morally reprehensible. "He beat you?" It was not a question. Catherine nodded. "Among other things, the bruises heal, but the rest." She trailed off, her eyes distant. "I tried to be a good wife. I tried to do everything he asked, but it was never enough. He would get drunk and angry, and I learned to hide." "But you can only hide for so long in a saloon. How did you get away?" A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "One of the saloon girls, Mabel. She helped me. She stole the keys to Marcus's safe and took enough money to buy a wagon and supplies. She told me to run as far as I could and never look back, so I did. I left in the middle of the night 2 weeks ago. I was trying to make it to Bannack, then maybe catch a stage to somewhere far away, somewhere he would never find me. And the wagon broke down." "Yes." "The axle snapped about 20 miles out. I tried to fix it, but I do not know anything about wagons. Then the storm came and I knew I was in trouble. I wrote that note in case someone found my body. I did not want them to send my corpse back to Marcus. I did not want to belong to him, even in death." The raw pain in her voice made Samuel want to find this Marcus Turner and show him what it felt like to be helpless and afraid. But that would not help Catherine now. "You said he owns a saloon. That means he has money, probably connections." "Yes. He knows the sheriff in Virginia City. They drink together. If Marcus reports me missing, the sheriff will help him look. Then we need to be smart about this." Samuel stood and began pacing, his mind working through the problem. "Virginia City is about 70 miles from here. The storm will slow anyone trying to search, but once it clears, he will be looking. You cannot stay here long term. It is too exposed and I am too easy to find." Catherine's face fell. "You want me to leave?" "No," Samuel said quickly. "I want you safe. There is a difference. Give me time to think this through." The storm continued for 3 more days, and during that time, Samuel and Catherine fell into an easy routine. He taught her how to cook his favorite meals, and she proved to be a quick learner. They played cards in the evening, and Samuel told her stories about growing up on the ranch, about his parents who had died 5 years ago from fever, about his dreams of building the ranch into something bigger. Catherine, in turn, opened up slowly. She told him about her childhood in a small town in Wyoming, about her mother who had died when she was young, about her father who had never recovered from that loss and had turned to drink. She talked about the books she loved to read, about how Marcus had burned them all because he said reading gave women ideas. "What kind of books?" Samuel asked one evening as they sat by the fire. "Everything. Poetry, novels, anything I could get my hands on. There was a library in the town where I grew up, and the librarian, Mrs. Henderson, she would let me borrow books even though my father never paid the fees. She said everyone deserved access to stories." "What was your favorite?" Catherine's eyes lit up, making her look younger, less haunted. "Jane Eyre. Have you read it?" Samuel shook his head. "Never been much of a reader myself, more of a rancher than a scholar. It is about a woman who refuses to compromise herself even when it would be easier. She values her independence and her integrity above everything. I read it when I was 16 and it changed how I saw the world." Her smile faded. "2 years later my father sold me to Marcus. I should have run then. You are running now. That takes courage or desperation. Sometimes they are the same thing." As the days passed, Samuel found himself increasingly drawn to Catherine. She was intelligent, resilient, and had a quiet strength that he admired. He loved the way she laughed at his jokes, even the bad ones. He loved how she insisted on helping with chores, despite his protests that she should rest. He loved the way she looked in the morning, her hair loose and her face soft with sleep. But she was married, and that was a line he could not cross, no matter how much he wanted to. On the fourth day, the storm finally broke. The sun came out, bright and blinding against the fresh snow. Pete came to the cabin that afternoon with news. "Boss, there is a man in town asking questions. Showed up yesterday when the storm was breaking. Says his wife ran away and he is looking for her. Offering a reward for information." Catherine went pale. "He found me." "Not yet," Samuel said firmly. "Pete, what did this man look like?" "Tall, maybe 40 years old, dark hair going gray. Well-dressed, expensive coat. Had a mean look about him, if you ask me. The kind of man who smiles with his mouth but not his eyes." "That is Marcus," Catherine whispered. She stood up, her hands shaking. "I have to leave. I have to run again." "Wait." Samuel grabbed her shoulders gently. "Think about it, Catherine. Where would you go? You have no money, no supplies, and he is already looking. If you run now, he will catch you. Then what do I do? Stay here and wait for him to find me? No, we need to be smarter than that." Samuel looked at Pete. "What is the legal situation? If he claims her as his wife, does he have the right to take her?" Pete scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Legally, yes. Husband has rights over his wife, as you know. But if she were to divorce him, or if he were to be proven unfit, that might change things." "Divorce takes time and we do not have that," Samuel said. "What about annulment? On what grounds?" Samuel looked at Catherine. "Was the marriage ever consummated?" She flushed red. "Yes, I wish I could say otherwise, but yes." "Then annulment is out. What about proving cruelty?" "You would need witnesses, documentation. And even then, a judge might not rule in her favor. Wives are expected to obey their husbands, and some judges think discipline is a husband's right." Catherine sank into a chair, her face in her hands. "There is no way out. He is going to find me and take me back, and this time he will make sure I never run again." Samuel knelt in front of her, taking her hands in his. "Listen to me. I will not let that happen. I promise you, Catherine, I will find a way to keep you safe." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "Why? Why would you risk so much for someone you barely know?" "Because I am falling in love with you," Samuel thought. But he could not say that, not when she was married to another man, not when she was so vulnerable. "Because it is the right thing to do," he said instead. That night, Samuel lay awake in the bunkhouse where he had moved to give Catherine privacy in the cabin. He stared at the ceiling, his mind racing through possibilities. There had to be a solution, some way to protect Catherine legally. An idea began to form, risky and complicated, but possibly their best option. The next morning he rode into Bannack alone. The town was small but bustling, with a main street lined with businesses. A general store, a hotel, 2 saloons, a church, and the sheriff's office. Samuel went straight to the latter. Sheriff Tom Dalton was a fair man in Samuel's experience. They had done business before, and Samuel had always found him to be honest and reasonable. Dalton was in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face that spoke of years spent outdoors. "Samuel Kane," Dalton said, looking up from his desk. "What brings you to town?" "I need some information, Tom. Legal information." Dalton leaned back in his chair. "This about the woman you found." Samuel's blood ran cold. "How did you know about that?" "I am the sheriff, Samuel. It is my job to know things. Pete was in town 4 days ago buying extra supplies. Told Jimmy at the general store that you had brought home someone who needed help. Word gets around." Dalton studied him carefully. "There is a man looking for his wife. Says she ran off. Description matches what I heard about your guest. She is fleeing an abusive marriage. That is what she told you. Marcus Turner tells a different story. Says his wife is troubled that she has these spells where she gets confused and runs off. Says he is worried about her safety." "He is lying. I have seen the bruises, Tom. This man beat her regularly." "Do you have proof? Witnesses?" "The bruises could have come from anywhere. She could have gotten them when her wagon broke down." Dalton held up his hand before Samuel could protest. "I am not saying I do not believe you. I am telling you what a court would say. Without proof, it is her word against his, and legally, she is his wife. He has the right to take her home." Samuel felt his temper rising. "Even if taking her home means she ends up dead." "Even then, unless you can prove intent to murder." "I do not like it any more than you do, Samuel, but that is the law." Samuel took a deep breath, forcing himself to calm down. Anger would not help Catherine. What if she were no longer his wife? Divorce takes months, sometimes years. And it is expensive. What if she were widowed? Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Are you suggesting what I think you are suggesting?" "No," Samuel said quickly. "I am not talking about killing anyone, but if Turner were to meet with an accident or if he were to disappear." "Stop right there. I cannot be party to any plan that involves harm coming to a man, even a man like Turner. And if something happened to him while he is here looking for his wife, you would be the first person I would investigate." Samuel ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Then what do I do?" "Just hand her over, legally, if he files a formal claim and can prove the marriage, yes. That is exactly what you would have to do." Dalton paused. "But there might be another way." "What?" "If Catherine were married to someone else, Turner's claim would be invalid." "You cannot be married to 2 people at the same time." "But she is already married to him." "Yes, but what if there was a prior marriage? What if she had married someone before Turner, and that marriage was never properly dissolved?" Samuel saw where Dalton was going. "You want me to forge documents?" "I am not saying anything of the sort. I am simply pointing out that records from the territories are often incomplete or lost. If someone were to come forward claiming to be Catherine's first husband, and if they had documentation proving that marriage took place before her marriage to Turner, then Turner's marriage would be invalid. She would legally belong to the first husband. And if that first husband were willing to let her go to grant her freedom, then she would be free." Dalton leaned forward. "I am not encouraging you to break the law, Samuel, but I am telling you how the law works. What you do with that information is up to you." Samuel left the sheriff's office with his mind spinning. Dalton's suggestion was risky. If they were caught forging documents, they could both end up in jail. But it might be Catherine's only chance at freedom. He spent the rest of the day in town, gathering information. He visited the county clerk's office and learned about marriage records. what they required, how they were filed. He talked to old-timers in the saloon, asking casual questions about marriages and divorces, how things used to be done in the early days of the territory. By the time he rode back to the ranch that evening, he had a plan. Catherine was waiting for him in the cabin, her face anxious. "Did you find out anything?" Samuel dismantled from Rusty and led the horse to the barn, with Catherine following close behind. Once they were inside and away from potential prying eyes, he told her everything Dalton had said. A false marriage. Catherine looked doubtful. Would that even work? It might. The key is making it believable. We would need to create a backstory, get documentation that looks authentic. It would not hold up to serious scrutiny, but it might be enough to make Turner back off. And who would be this fictional first husband? Samuel looked at her steadily. Me. Catherine's eyes widened. Samuel, I cannot ask you to do that. If we are caught, you could go to jail. You could lose your ranch, everything you have worked for. I know the risks. But Catherine, I cannot just hand you over to a man who beats you. I cannot stand by and watch that happen. Why? She stepped closer to him, her eyes searching his face. Why are you willing to risk so much for me? Samuel had been asking himself the same question for days, and he finally had to acknowledge the truth. Because somewhere along the way in these past few days, I have come to care about you. More than I should, more than is probably wise. You are married to another man, and I respect that. But I cannot let him hurt you anymore. Catherine's hand came up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his rough skin. Samuel, she whispered, I care about you too, more than I thought possible, but my marriage to Marcus, it is not real. It was never real. He bought me like property. I never chose him, never wanted him. If I could choose, if I were free to choose. Do not, Samuel said, catching her hand and pulling it away from his face. Do not say something you might regret. You are vulnerable right now, and I am offering you help. Your feelings might change once you are safe. They will not change. Catherine's voice was fierce. I know my own heart, Samuel. I have known my own heart since the second day I was here, when you sat by my bed all night to keep me from being afraid. I have known it every time you have looked at me like I am worth something, like I am more than just a piece of property. Do not tell me what I feel. The air between them felt charged, electric. Samuel wanted nothing more than to pull her into his arms, to kiss her and tell her that he felt the same way. But he could not while she was still legally bound to Marcus Turner. Once you are free, he said quietly. Once this is all over and you are legally free, then we can talk about this. But not now. Not like this. Catherine nodded, disappointment clear on her face, but also understanding. All right. So what do? We create a marriage certificate dated 4 years ago, before you married Turner. We will say we got married in Wyoming, in your hometown. Small ceremony, just a few witnesses who have since moved away or died. It needs to be specific enough to be believable, but vague enough that it is hard to verify. What about witnesses now? If Turner challenges it, would we not need people to testify that we were married? Pete will help. And I have friends in town who owe me favors. The important thing is to have documentation and to present a united front. Over the next 3 days, they worked on their plan. Samuel rode to Bannack and spoke with the forger he had learned about from his inquiries. A man named Jim, who had once worked as a clerk and knew how to create convincing documents. For a price, Jim produced a marriage certificate that looked authentically aged, complete with the proper seals and signatures. Catherine and Samuel rehearsed their story until it was perfect. They had met in Cheyenne, Wyoming, in 1874. Catherine had been 17, Samuel 21. They had fallen in love and married quickly, against her father's wishes. They had lived together for 6 months before Samuel had to return to Montana to care for his dying mother. He had sent for Catherine, but the letters had never reached her. By the time he returned to Wyoming a year later, she was already married to Marcus Turner, and her father claimed she had wanted nothing to do with Samuel. It was a plausible story, the kind of tragedy that happened often in the scattered communities of the West where communication was unreliable, and families were separated by vast distances. "You think he will believe it?" Catherine asked the night before they planned to confront Turner. "He does not have to believe it. He just has to acknowledge that there is doubt about the legality of his marriage. That might be enough to make him give up. You do not know Marcus. He does not give up. He does not let go of things he considers his." Samuel looked at her across the table, at the fear in her beautiful green eyes, and felt his resolve harden. "Then we will have to convince him that you were never his to begin with." The next morning, Samuel rode into Bannack with Catherine beside him. She wore one of his sister's better dresses and held her head high, but he could feel the tension radiating from her. They went straight to the sheriff's office. Marcus Turner was there, talking with Sheriff Dalton. He was just as Pete had described. Tall, well-dressed, with dark hair going gray and a handsome face that would have been more appealing if not for the coldness in his eyes. Those eyes locked onto Catherine the moment she walked through the door. "Catherine," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "Thank God you are all right. I have been so worried about you, darling. Come here." Catherine stood her ground. "I am not going anywhere with you, Marcus." Turner's expression hardened. "You are my wife. You belong with me." "Actually," Samuel said, stepping forward, "she is my wife." The room went silent. Turner looked at Samuel as if he had sprouted a second head. "Excuse me." Samuel pulled the forged marriage certificate from his coat and handed it to Sheriff Dalton. "Catherine and I were married in Cheyenne, Wyoming in August of 1874. That makes her my wife, not yours." Dalton examined the document carefully, his face impassive. Turner snatched it from his hands and stared at it, his face reddening. "This is a forgery," he spat. "A pathetic attempt to steal my wife." "It looks legitimate to me," Dalton said. "It has all the proper seals and signatures." "It is a lie. Catherine was never married before me. Her father would have told me." "My father sold me to you like cattle," Catherine said, her voice shaking but clear. "He never cared what I wanted or what was best for me. He certainly would not have told you about a previous marriage that would have invalidated the sale." Turner's mask slipped, and for a moment, Samuel saw the rage beneath. "You ungrateful girl. After everything I did for you, gave you a home, respectability, you beat me," Catherine said flatly. "You treated me like property. Whatever you gave me, I paid for with bruises and fear. I disciplined you when you misbehaved, as is my right as your husband. You are not my husband. You never were." Turner turned to Dalton. "Sheriff, this is obviously a conspiracy. This man found my wife and is now trying to steal her from me with false documents. I demand you arrest him for forgery and fraud." Dalton looked at the certificate again, then at Samuel and Catherine. Samuel held his breath. This was the moment that would determine everything. If Dalton sided with Turner, it was over. "Mr. Turner," Dalton said slowly, "this document appears authentic to me. Unless you can prove it is false, I have to accept it as legitimate. That means Catherine Kane is this man's wife, not yours. Any marriage that took place afterward would be invalid." "This is ridiculous," Turner snarled. "You know this is a fake." "What I know," Dalton said, his voice hardening, "is that there is documentation here that predates your alleged marriage. If you want to challenge it, you are welcome to take the matter to court. But until a judge says otherwise, I am bound to accept this as legitimate." Turner's hand moved toward his coat, and Samuel tensed, ready to reach for his own gun. But Turner just pulled out a wallet and threw money on Dalton's desk. That is $200, Sheriff. I am sure we can come to an understanding. Dalton's face went cold. Are you trying to bribe a law officer, Mr. Turner? I am simply making a donation to the sheriff's office. Take your money and get out of my office. You are no longer welcome in Bannack. If I see you bothering the Kanes, I will arrest you for harassment. Turner's face contorted with rage. He looked at Catherine, and the hatred in his eyes made Samuel step protectively in front of her. This is not over, Turner said quietly. You think you can steal from me and get away with it. You think a piece of paper is going to stop me. It is over, Marcus, Catherine said from behind Samuel. I am never coming back to you. I would rather die. That can be arranged. That sounded like a threat, Dalton said, his hand moving to his gun. Mr. Turner, I suggest you leave town now while you still can. For a long moment, Turner did not move. Then he picked up his money, gave Catherine one last venomous look, and stalked out of the office. Through the window, they watched him mount his horse and ride out of town, heading north toward Virginia City. Samuel let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. Catherine's hand found his, and he squeezed it gently. Is it really over? She asked. For now, Dalton said. But Samuel, you should know that Turner is the type to hold a grudge. Watch your back. I will, thank you, Tom. Outside the sheriff's office, Catherine turned to Samuel, and there were tears streaming down her face, but they were tears of relief, not fear. I am free, she whispered. I am actually free. Samuel wanted to pull her into his arms, but they were on the main street with people watching. Instead, he just smiled and said, Let us go home. The ride back to the ranch was quiet. Catherine seemed lost in thought, processing everything that had happened. When they arrived, Pete was waiting with a grin on his weathered face. Did it work? It worked, Samuel confirmed. Turner is gone. Pete let out a whoop and slapped his knee. I knew it would. You are a clever man, boss. That night, Samuel and Catherine sat by the fire in the cabin. There was a strange tension between them now, an awareness that everything had changed. She was free, or at least as free as the forged documents could make her. The barrier that had existed between them was gone. What happens now? Catherine asked softly. That depends on what you want. You are welcome to stay here as long as you like. Or if you want to go somewhere else, start fresh somewhere that Turner could never find you, I will help you do that. What do you want? Samuel looked at her, at the firelight dancing in her green eyes, at the way she leaned toward him as if drawn by invisible threads. I want you to stay. I want to court you properly, to give you time to heal and figure out what you want without the pressure of running or hiding. And then, if you are willing, I want to marry you, for real this time. Catherine smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. I want that too. But Samuel, we are already married, according to that certificate. That was a legal fiction, something we created to protect you. When we marry, I want it to be real. I want it to be because we both choose it, not because we were forced into it by circumstances. She moved from her chair to sit beside him on the floor by the fire. Then court me, Samuel Kane. Show me what it is like to be courted by a good man. He took her hand in his, marveling at how small and delicate it was compared to his rough, work-worn hands. I will do my best, though I should warn you, I am not much for fancy words or grand gestures. I do not need fancy words, I just need honesty and kindness. You have already given me more of both than anyone else in my life. They sat there by the fire, hands intertwined, and talked late into the night. They talked about their childhoods, their dreams, the things they hoped for in life. Catherine told him about wanting to learn to read better, to have access to books again. Samuel told her about his plan to expand the ranch, to breed better horses, to maybe one day have a family. I want children, Catherine said softly. I always have, but with Marcus, the thought terrified me. I could not imagine bringing a child into that house, subjecting them to his anger and cruelty. But with you, she trailed off, blushing. With me, you could imagine it. Yes, I can imagine a home full of love and laughter. I can imagine children who grow up knowing they are wanted and cherished. I can imagine growing old with someone who treats me as an equal partner, not as property. Samuel lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. Then, that is what we will build together. But first, let us take time to know each other. Let us do this right. Over the following weeks, Samuel courted Catherine with a patience and tenderness that surprised even him. He was not naturally romantic, but he found himself wanting to make her smile, to see that light in her eyes that drove away the shadows of her past. He brought her wildflowers that still bloomed despite the snow, hardy winter blossoms that matched her own resilience. He taught her to ride, patiently guiding her through the basics until she could sit a horse with confidence. They rode across his land together, and he showed her every corner of the ranch, sharing his vision for its future. Catherine, in turn, transformed his cabin into a home. She sewed curtains for the windows, organized his chaotic kitchen, and started a small herb garden in pots that sat on the windowsill. She cooked meals that were better than anything Samuel had eaten in years, and they fell into the habit of having long dinners together, talking about everything and nothing. Pete watched this courtship with approval and occasionally offered Samuel advice. "Do not wait too long, boss," he said one day while they were mending fence. "That woman loves you and you love her. Life is short, especially out here. Do not waste time that you could spend being happy. I want to make sure she is ready. She has been through so much. She is tougher than you think, and she is healing. I see it every day. She smiles more, laughs more. That is because of you." Samuel knew Pete was right, but he was also afraid. What if he rushed things and Catherine felt pressured? What if she agreed to marry him out of gratitude rather than love? He could not bear the thought of her feeling trapped again, even in a better situation. One evening in late January, about 2 months after Samuel had found Catherine in the snow, they were sitting together on the porch despite the cold. The sky was clear, and the stars were brilliant overhead. Catherine was wrapped in blankets, her head resting against Samuel's shoulder. "Tell me about your parents," she said. "You have mentioned them, but I want to know more." Samuel smiled at the memory. "My father was a tough man, had to be to survive out here, but he was fair, and he loved my mother more than anything in the world." You could see it in the way he looked at her, the way he always made sure she had the best of everything, even when times were hard. "My mother was the heart of this place. She made it feel like home, not just a ranch. When they died, I thought I would never get that feeling back. But you have brought it back, Catherine. You have made this place feel like home again." Catherine turned to look at him, her eyes shining in the starlight. "Samuel, I need to tell you something." "What is it?" "I love you. I know we have only known each other for 2 months, and I know you want to take things slow, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. I love you. Not because you saved me, not because I am grateful, but because of who you are. You are kind and patient and honest. You make me feel safe. You make me feel valued. You make me want to build a life, not just survive. I love you." Samuel's heart felt like it might burst. "Catherine, I love you too. I have loved you for weeks now, but I was afraid to say it. I was afraid you would feel pressured. The only thing I feel is certain. I am certain that I want to spend my life with you. I am certain that what we have is real. I am certain that I want to be your wife, truly your wife." Samuel cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. It was their first real kiss, and it was everything he had dreamed it would be. She tasted like the peppermint tea she had been drinking, and her lips were soft and eager against his. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. "Marry me," Samuel said. "Not the fake marriage on paper, but a real marriage." Stand with me in front of a preacher and God and make vows that we both mean." "Yes," Catherine said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married 3 weeks later in the small church in Bannack. It was a simple ceremony, attended by Pete, Sheriff Dalton, and a handful of other friends Samuel had made in town. Catherine wore a dress that the local seamstress had made for her, pale yellow with lace at the collar and cuffs. She looked beautiful. The preacher was an older man named Reverend Matthews, who had heard Catherine's story and approved of Samuel's protection of her. He spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred bond of marriage, and about the importance of choosing your partner with care and intention. When it came time for the vows, Samuel looked into Catherine's eyes and spoke from his heart. "Catherine, I promise to love you and cherish you for all the days of my life. I promise to treat you as my equal partner, to listen to your thoughts and respect your opinions. I promise to protect you not by controlling you, but by standing beside you. I promise to build a home with you where love and laughter are more common than tears. I promise to be the man you deserve." Catherine's voice was steady as she made her own vows. "Samuel, I promise to love you with my whole heart. I promise to be your partner in all things, to support your dreams and share your burdens. I promise to build a life with you based on trust and honesty. I promise to choose you every day for the rest of my life. You saved me from the snow, but more than that, you showed me what love should be. I promise to honor that gift." When Reverend Matthews pronounced them husband and wife, Samuel kissed Catherine with all the love and joy in his heart. The small congregation cheered, and Pete wiped tears from his weathered face. The wedding celebration was held at the ranch. Catherine had spent days preparing food, and Pete had brought out a bottle of whiskey he had been saving for a special occasion. They ate and drank and danced to the music of a fiddle player Pete had convinced to come out from town. As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, Samuel and Catherine stood together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. "Happy?" Samuel asked. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Catherine replied. "I keep thinking about that night in the snow when I thought I was going to die. I never imagined that something so terrible could lead to something so wonderful. I think about that too. About how easily I could have missed you, could have taken a different trail that day. The idea of you dying out there alone, it still haunts me sometimes." Catherine took his hand. "But you did not miss me. You found me and you saved me, and now we are here. That is what matters." They went inside and closed the door on the world, beginning their first night as truly married partners. Samuel was gentle with Catherine, aware that her experiences with Marcus had likely been painful and frightening. But she responded to his touch with trust and growing passion, and by the time the moon rose high in the sky, they had consummated their marriage in love and tenderness. The winter passed, and spring came to Montana with its usual mix of mud and new life. Catherine thrived in her new role as Samuel's wife and partner. She learned the business of ranching, keeping the books and managing supplies. She proved to have a good head for numbers and often found ways to save money or maximize profits. Samuel fell more in love with her every day. He loved watching her work in the garden she had planted, loved the way she sang while she cooked, loved the sound of her laughter echoing through the house. She had healed from her ordeal, gaining weight and color until she glowed with health and happiness. In May, Catherine realized she was pregnant. She told Samuel one evening after dinner, her face a mix of joy and nervousness. "I know we have not talked about this yet, about when we wanted to start a family," she said, "but I am almost certain. I have missed my monthly courses twice now, and I have been feeling sick in the mornings." Samuel's face broke into the widest smile Catherine had ever seen. He swept her up in his arms, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to put her down. "This is wonderful news," he said. "The best news. We are going to be parents, Catherine. We are going to have a family. You are not worried about me being pregnant so soon. Why would I be worried? This is what we both wanted, a child to love and raise together. Our child." Catherine's eyes filled with happy tears. "I was so afraid of being pregnant when I was with Marcus. But with you, I am just excited. I cannot wait to meet this little person we have made together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Samuel was attentive and caring, insisting that Catherine rest more and not overwork herself. She tolerated his fussing with good humor, though she often reminded him that pregnancy was not an illness, and she was perfectly capable of continuing her normal activities. They spent long evenings discussing names and planning for the baby. They converted a corner of the cabin into a nursery, and Catherine sewed tiny clothes while Samuel built a cradle from oak. In early December, almost exactly a year after Samuel had found Catherine in the snow, she went into labor. It was a long and difficult labor that lasted through the night and into the next day. Samuel held her hand through it all, wiping her forehead with cool cloths and whispering encouragement. The midwife from town, a capable woman named Mrs. Harris, directed the process with calm efficiency. "You are doing well, dear," she told Catherine. "Not much longer now, just a few more pushes." Catherine, exhausted and in pain, looked at Samuel with eyes that had seen too much suffering in her short life. But there was determination there too, and strength. She bore down with the next contraction, and finally, blessedly, there was the sound of a baby's cry. "It is a boy," Mrs. Harris announced, holding up the red-faced, squalling infant. "A big, healthy boy." Samuel looked at his son, at this tiny person he and Catherine had created together, and felt overwhelming love. When Mrs. Harris placed the baby in Catherine's arms, he watched his wife's face transform with maternal devotion. "Hello, little one," Catherine whispered. "Welcome to the world. We have been waiting for you." They named him James Peter Kane, James after Samuel's father and Peter after Pete, who had been such a good friend to them both. The old ranch hand was deeply touched when they told him, and he became the baby's honorary grandfather, doting on the child with unexpected tenderness. The first year of James's life was filled with the usual challenges and joys of new parenthood. Catherine proved to be a natural mother, patient and loving. Samuel discovered reserves of tenderness he had not known he possessed, spending hours simply holding his son and marveling at his tiny fingers and toes. The ranch prospered. With Catherine's help managing the finances, they were able to expand their herd and improve their breeding stock. They hired another hand to help Pete, a young man named Tom who was hardworking and reliable. But there was always a shadow in the back of their minds: Marcus Turner. They had heard nothing from him since that day in the sheriff's office, but they knew men like him did not forget or forgive. Samuel kept his rifle close and made sure the cabin was secure. He taught Catherine to shoot, and she became surprisingly proficient. The threat manifested on a cold November evening when James was nearly a year old. Samuel was in the barn with Pete and Tom, checking on a mare that was about to foal. Catherine was in the cabin with the baby when she heard horses outside. She looked out the window and saw 3 men dismounting. One of them was Marcus Turner. Catherine's blood ran cold. She grabbed the rifle from its place above the door and checked that it was loaded. Then she went to the cradle where James was sleeping and positioned herself between her son and the door. The knock came, loud and demanding. "Catherine, I know you are in there. Open the door." She did not respond, her hand steady on the rifle despite her racing heart. "Catherine, we need to talk. I have been patient, giving you time to come to your senses, but it has been over a year. This game has gone on long enough. Go away, Marcus, Catherine called through the door. You have no right to be here. I have every right. You are my wife. I am Samuel Kane's wife. We settled this a year ago. You settled it with lies and forged documents, but I have done some investigating, Catherine. I went to Cheyenne. There is no record of any marriage between you and Samuel Kane. No one there remembers any such wedding. Your precious marriage certificate is a fake, just as I always suspected. Catherine's heart sank. She had known this moment might come, but she had hoped they would have more time. It does not matter, she said. I will never come back to you. You do not have a choice. That baby I hear crying, is it yours? Is it his? Leave my son out of this. Marcus laughed, cold and cruel. Your son, how touching. What will happen to him when I take you back, I wonder? Maybe I will keep him, raise him as my own. Or maybe I will leave him here to be raised by that cowboy. A boy needs his mother, though. It would be a shame to separate you. The door rattled as Marcus tried the handle. Catherine raised the rifle, her finger on the trigger. If you break down that door, I will shoot you. You do not have the courage. The door burst open and Marcus stepped inside, flanked by his two men. Catherine did not hesitate. She fired, aiming for his shoulder. The rifle's report was deafening in the small cabin, and Marcus stumbled backward with a cry of pain. Samuel came running from the barn at the sound of the gunshot, his own rifle in hand. He took in the scene instantly. Catherine holding the smoking rifle, the baby crying in his cradle, Marcus bleeding from his shoulder, and the two men with him reaching for their guns. Do not, Samuel said, his rifle trained on them. Behind him, Pete and Tom appeared, also armed. This is not your fight, Kane, one of Marcus's men said. Mr. Turner just wants his wife back. She is not his wife, Samuel said coldly. She is mine. And if you do not get off my property right now, there will be more than one man bleeding tonight. Marcus was clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. His face was pale with shock and rage. You shot me, he said to Catherine, as if he could not quite believe it. I told you I would, Catherine replied, her voice steady even though she was shaking inside. I told you I would rather die than go back to you. I meant it. Sheriff Dalton arrived on horseback, drawn by the sound of gunfire. He took in the scene and drew his own weapon. What is going on here? This man broke into my home, Samuel said. He threatened my wife and child. She shot him in self-defense. That is not what happened, Marcus protested. She is my wife and I came to claim what is mine. They have been lying to you all along, Sheriff. There was no previous marriage. The certificate was a forgery. Dalton looked at Samuel, his expression unreadable. Is that true? Samuel met his eyes steadily. He could lie, but Dalton would know. And more importantly, he was tired of living with the lie. The certificate was created to protect Catherine from an abusive husband, but our marriage now, our real marriage, is legitimate. We were married by Reverend Matthews over a year ago. We have a child together. Whatever she was before, she is my wife now in the eyes of God and the law. That does not change the fact that she was married to me first, Marcus said. She still is married to me. She committed bigamy when she married you. Dalton sighed. This is getting complicated. Mr. Turner, you need medical attention. I suggest you get to the doctor in town. As for the rest of this, it is going to have to be settled by a judge. Fine, Marcus said through gritted teeth. Let a judge decide. But I am telling you, Sheriff, these people are criminals. They forged documents, they lied to you, and now she has shot me. They should be in jail. You broke into their home and threatened them, Dalton countered. Catherine Kane acted in self-defense. As for the rest, like I said, a judge will have to sort it out. Now get out of here before I arrest you for trespassing and threatening a family. Marcus and his men left, but not before Marcus gave Catherine one last look filled with hatred and promise. "This is not over," he said. "I will see you back in Virginia City if it is the last thing I do." After they were gone, Samuel went to Catherine and took the rifle from her trembling hands. "Are you all right?" "I shot him," she whispered. "I actually shot him. You protected yourself and our son. You did what you had to do." Catherine looked up at Samuel, tears streaming down her face. "He is not going to stop. He is going to take this to court, and when the judge finds out we lied about the first marriage, he is going to give me back to Marcus. And James," her voice broke. Samuel pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "Listen to me, Catherine. I will not let that happen. We will fight this and we will win. Marcus is right that we lied about the initial marriage, but that does not negate our real marriage, and there is plenty of evidence of his abuse. We will bring in Mabel from the saloon, anyone else who saw how he treated you. We will make sure the judge knows exactly what kind of man he is. What if it is not enough? What if the law says I belong to him regardless? Then we will leave. We will take James and go somewhere Marcus can never find us. California, Oregon, maybe even Canada. I will not let him take you, Catherine. I would rather give up everything I have than see you back with him." Sheriff Dalton cleared his throat. "Samuel, Catherine, I need to be honest with you. When this goes to court, things could go badly. Forgery is a serious crime. And despite everything Marcus has done, the law does give husbands significant rights over their wives. If the judge is conservative, he might rule in Marcus's favor." "Then what do we do?" Samuel asked. Dalton thought for a moment. "You need a lawyer, a good one. And you need to make a case not just that Marcus is abusive, but that Catherine's marriage to him was invalid from the start. Was there any coercion involved? Was she underage? Anything that might nullify the marriage on legal grounds?" Catherine thought back to that terrible day when her father had brought Marcus to their home. "I was 18, so not underage, but my father sold me. Marcus paid him $500 and a wagon. I did not want to marry him. I told my father I did not want to, but he said I did not have a choice. He said if I did not marry Marcus, he would throw me out with nothing." "That is coercion," Dalton said. "A marriage entered into under duress can potentially be annulled." "It is not a guarantee, but it is an angle worth pursuing." Over the next few weeks, Samuel and Catherine worked with a lawyer from Virginia City named Robert Hayes. Hayes was a sharp man in his 40s who had built a reputation for taking on difficult cases. He listened to Catherine's story, reviewed all the evidence, and began building their case. He brought in witnesses who had seen Marcus's cruelty, including Mabel from the saloon, who testified to the bruises she had seen on Catherine and the fear she had lived with daily. He found Catherine's father, who reluctantly admitted under questioning that he had accepted money for his daughter and that she had not wanted the marriage. The court case took place in late January, a little over 2 years after Samuel had found Catherine in the snow. The courthouse in Virginia City was packed with spectators drawn by the scandalous nature of the case. Samuel sat beside Catherine, holding her hand and offering silent support. Marcus, his shoulder healed from Catherine's bullet, sat on the other side of the courtroom with his own lawyer, looking confident. He had dressed well for the occasion, playing the role of the wronged husband seeking to reclaim his wayward wife. The judge, a stern-looking man named Judge Harrison, heard arguments from both sides. Marcus's lawyer painted Catherine as an ungrateful wife who had abandoned her husband for another man, using forgery and lies to justify her adultery. Hayes painted Marcus as a cruel man who had essentially purchased a young woman and then brutalized her, making her marriage to him invalid from the start. Catherine was called to testify. She stood in the witness box, her hands trembling but her voice steady, and told her story. She described the day her father sold her, the wedding night when Marcus first hit her, the 3 years of abuse that followed. She described her escape and Samuel's rescue. "You love Samuel Kane?" the judge asked her directly. "Yes, Your Honor, I love him with all my heart. He is a good man who has shown me what real love and partnership look like." "And your marriage to Marcus Turner, how do you view that now?" "It was never a real marriage, Your Honor. It was slavery dressed up in legal papers. I was never Marcus's wife in any meaningful sense. I was his property, and he treated me as such." Marcus took the stand and told a different story. He claimed Catherine had been difficult and disobedient, that he had disciplined her as was his right, but never abused her. He claimed she had run off with Samuel while he was away on business, stealing money from him in the process. He presented himself as the victim, a hard-working businessman whose wife had betrayed him. The trial lasted 3 days. On the final day, Judge Harrison delivered his verdict. "This court has heard compelling testimony from both sides," he began. "The law in these matters is complex. On one hand, Mr. Turner's marriage to Catherine appears to be legal on its face. On the other hand, there is significant evidence that the marriage was entered into under duress, and that Mr. Turner's treatment of his wife was, at minimum, excessively harsh." Samuel felt Catherine's hand tighten in his. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the evidence suggests that Catherine's father essentially sold his daughter, which, while not technically illegal, certainly calls into question the validity of her consent to the marriage. A marriage without true consent is not a marriage at all. Additionally, Catherine and Samuel Kane have been married for over a year and have a child together. Their marriage, while arguably bigamous at the time it occurred, has resulted in a family unit that appears stable and loving. This court is reluctant to break apart such a family and return a woman to a man who, based on the testimony of multiple witnesses, treated her with cruelty." Samuel barely dared to breathe. "Therefore, this court finds that Catherine's marriage to Marcus Turner is hereby annulled on the grounds of coercion and duress. The annulment is retroactive to the date of the original marriage, meaning that Catherine was never legally Marcus Turner's wife. Her subsequent marriage to Samuel Kane is therefore legitimate and valid. Custody of James Kane remains with his parents, Catherine and Samuel Kane. Mr. Turner, you have no legal claim to Catherine or her child. This matter is closed." The courtroom erupted. Marcus stood up, his face purple with rage, shouting objections. His lawyer tried to calm him, but Marcus shoved him aside and started toward Catherine. Samuel was on his feet instantly, placing himself between Catherine and Marcus. "Stay away from her," Samuel said, his voice low and dangerous. Sheriff Dalton and 2 deputies intervened, grabbing Marcus and physically restraining him. "Mr. Turner, you need to leave now," Dalton said firmly. "The judge has ruled. It is over." Marcus struggled against their grip, his eyes wild. "This is not over. I will appeal. I will take this to a higher court." "You can try," Judge Harrison said coldly. "But I will tell you right now that my decision is sound and based on solid legal precedent. You will be wasting your time and money. Mr. Turner, I suggest you accept this ruling and move on with your life. You lost. The woman you claimed as your wife is free, and she wants nothing to do with you. Have some dignity and let her go." Marcus was escorted from the courtroom, still shouting threats and curses. Samuel turned to Catherine and saw that she was crying, but these were tears of joy and relief. "It is really over," she said. "It is really, truly over." Samuel pulled her into his arms, not caring that the whole courtroom was watching. "You are free, Catherine. You are mine and I am yours, and no one can ever come between us again." Hayes came over, a satisfied smile on his face. "Congratulations, Mr. and Mrs. Kane. Justice was served today." "Thank you," Samuel said, shaking the lawyer's hand. "We could not have done this without you. You are welcome. Though I must say you two did most of the work. Your love for each other, your commitment to fighting for your family, that is what won this case. The law just caught up to what was already true in your hearts." They left the courthouse and returned to Bannack, to their ranch and their son. Pete had been watching James during the trial, and he handed the baby over with tears in his eyes. "I knew you would win, boss. I knew it." That night, Samuel and Catherine celebrated with a quiet dinner in their cabin. James was asleep in his cradle, and the fire crackled warmly in the hearth. "I keep thinking about that day in the snow," Catherine said. "How desperate I was, how certain I was going to die. I wrote that note because I wanted someone to know that I had not wanted to go back, even in death. I never imagined that the person who found me would change my life so completely." "I think about it too," Samuel admitted. "About all the things that had to align for us to find each other. If I had left an hour later, if I had taken a different trail, if the storm had been worse, we never would have met. It feels like fate." "You believe in fate?" "I believe that some things are meant to be. You and me, Catherine, we were meant to be, I am sure of it." Catherine moved to sit on his lap, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I love you, Samuel Kane. I love the life we have built together. I love our son. I love this ranch and our friends and the future we are going to have. I love that you see me as an equal, that you respect my opinions and trust my judgment. I love that you are patient and kind and strong. I love everything about you." Samuel kissed her deeply, pouring all his love and devotion into that kiss. "I love you too, Catherine. You have made me happier than I ever thought possible. You have given me a family and a purpose beyond just surviving. You have given me a reason to build something lasting and beautiful." They made love that night with a joy and freedom they had never quite felt before, knowing that the shadow of Marcus Turner no longer hung over them. They were truly free to love each other without reservation. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch continued to prosper, and Samuel and Catherine became respected members of the Bannack community. They had 4 more children: a daughter named Sarah 2 years after James, twin boys named William and Thomas 3 years after that, and finally another daughter named Emma when Catherine was 30. Their cabin was expanded into a proper ranch house with multiple bedrooms and a large kitchen where Catherine loved to cook and bake. They hired more hands as the ranch grew, and Pete eventually retired to a small cabin on the property where he lived out his remaining years as a beloved member of the family. James grew into a fine young man, strong and hardworking like his father, with his mother's green eyes and sharp intelligence. He eventually took over much of the ranch operations, allowing Samuel and Catherine to slow down a bit in their later years. Sarah became a teacher, opening a small school in Bannack where she taught children to read and write. William and Thomas went into business together, starting a successful freight company. Emma, the youngest, inherited her mother's love of books and became a writer, publishing stories about life in the West. Samuel and Catherine grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They faced the challenges that come with ranching and raising a family: harsh winters, difficult calving seasons, the occasional drought or disease. But they faced these challenges together, always a team, always united. On their 25th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Catherine back to the spot where he had found her in the snow. It was summer now, and wildflowers bloomed where snow had once fallen. They stood there hand in hand, looking out over the Montana landscape they both loved. "Do you remember what you said to me the first time you woke up in my cabin?" Samuel asked. "I said, 'Are you going to send me back?' And I said I would not, that you were safe. I meant it then and I mean it now. You have always been safe with me, Catherine. You always will be. I know. You have never given me reason to doubt it. Samuel, these 25 years with you have been the best of my life. You saved me from the snow, but more than that, you saved me from a life without love or hope. You showed me what it means to be cherished, to be valued, to be truly loved. You did the same for me. Before you, I was just going through the motions, running the ranch because it was what my father would have wanted, not because I had any real passion for it. You gave me a reason to build something beautiful. You gave me a family to love and protect. You gave me purpose. They kissed there among the wildflowers. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life together based on love, trust, and mutual respect. Marcus Turner never bothered them again. They heard through the grapevine that he had sold his saloon in Virginia City and moved back east, chasing some new business venture that eventually failed. He died a bitter, lonely man, his cruelty having driven away anyone who might have cared for him. Catherine's father tried to reach out to her once, years after the trial, hoping to meet his grandchildren. But Catherine, though she had forgiven him in her heart, chose not to re-establish contact. Some wounds, while healed, left scars that made certain relationships impossible to rebuild. Pete passed away when James was 15, peacefully in his sleep after a life well lived. The whole family mourned him, and Samuel made sure Pete was buried on the ranch with a headstone that read, "Peter Stone, friend and family." As Samuel and Catherine entered their 60s, they began to slow down. They handed over daily operations of the ranch to James and spent more time with their grandchildren, of whom there were eventually 12. They loved having the ranch house filled with the noise and laughter of children again. One winter evening, when Samuel was 65 and Catherine 64, they sat together by the fire much as they had on that first night when everything was new and uncertain. Catherine's hair was completely silver now, and Samuel's face was deeply lined by years of sun and wind, but they were still vital, still deeply in love. "You ever regret it?" Catherine asked. "Taking me in that day, risking everything to protect me?" Samuel looked at her, this woman who had been his partner for over 40 years, and smiled. "Not for a single second. You were the best thing that ever happened to me, Catherine. You and our children and this life we built together. If I could go back to that day in the snow, I would do everything exactly the same. Even the forgery and the lies. Even that. Sometimes doing the right thing means breaking the rules. I broke the law to protect you, and I would do it again without hesitation, because you were worth it. You were worth everything." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire and listening to the wind outside. It was a peaceful moment, the kind that comes from a life well lived and love freely given. Samuel Kane passed away 3 years later at the age of 68 from a heart attack while he was out riding the boundaries of his ranch. He died doing what he loved, on the land he had built into something lasting. Catherine was devastated by his loss, but also grateful for the 43 years they had shared. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, before passing peacefully in her sleep at the age of 72. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their headstones simple but meaningful. Samuel's read, "Samuel Kane, beloved husband and father, 1857–1925. He saved a life and gained a world." Catherine's read, "Catherine Kane, beloved wife and mother, 1856–1928. She wrote, 'Please don't send me back,' and found a home." The ranch continued to thrive under James's management and eventually passed to his own children. The Kane family became one of the most respected in Montana, known for their integrity, their kindness, and their commitment to justice. And while the story of how Samuel and Catherine met eventually became family legend, the love they had shared remained very real in the hearts of all who had known them. Years later, one of their great-great-grandchildren, a girl named Catherine after her ancestor, found an old letter in a trunk in the ranch house attic. It was yellowed with age, the writing faded but still legible. It was the original note that Catherine Turner had written in the snow that desperate day in December 1878. "Please don't send me back." Beneath it, in different handwriting, someone had added a response, probably Samuel himself. "I never will. You are home now." And that simple exchange, written in desperation and answered in love, told the entire story of a cowboy who found a woman in the snow and chose to save her, and in doing so, saved himself.